Hi folks, it's Coach Kelvin here from the We Run Virtual Run Club and We Run Coach for Leeds and surrounding areas as well as online coaching. In this little video, I'm going to share some thoughts on and ideas on how to make the decision if you don't feel like running. So that decision whether to run or whether to skip the run. And what's quite interesting is we're actually hardwired not to run. We're actually hardwired to sit around, do nothing, eat lots of food, put on a bit of weight. And if today and this week went well and we didn't experience too much discomfort, we're actually programmed to repeat that week over and over again. And this is a protection mechanism that's kind of like, was really useful thousands of years ago. It was something that would keep us alive. Whereas, in this day and age, we've actually sometimes got to almost kind of like nudge ourselves out of the door or nudge ourselves to do exercise. But I've definitely got some things to think about to help us make that decision and make sure that we're not just listening to that kind of side of us that's hardwired as a protection mechanism that was designed to keep us alive thousands of years ago. So a few things to think about, and I always think the first two are you injured and are you ill? And ill, in terms of something that would likely to stop you running. And if the answer to those things is like, yes, I'm injured and I've, not in the sort of process of rehabbing with guidance from a physio, it's probably a good idea to take a few days off and see if things settle down. And the same with illness. The other thing to ask yourself is, what are your goals? Are you looking at health goals mainly, or are you looking at performance goals? In other words, are we looking to complete a long distance event or get a PB in a race? Or do we just run to kind of get out and enjoy running and to be healthy? The other thing is, what phase of training are you in? So if you're in a recovery phase of training or like a base build, it might sort of sway that decision whether you skip a run or not, or whether you're in that sort of peak phase of training. It's worth looking at what load have you applied in the last 7 days, and that could be running load, and it could also be external stress as well, like work. Also, what load's coming up in the next 7 days? Do we need to prepare ourselves for a workout that's more important in the next few days or week? Within the stage of your training that you're already in, how do you expect to feel? Because, we can feel quite tired in peak blocks of training, or maybe we're, just building back up after a big event, and that might be normal. The other thing is, what's your hydration and fueling status like? We often think about skipping the run, so we think of runs and workouts. And it might be that we've just had maybe poor hydration over the last few days, or maybe we haven't been fueling as well as we could have been. A couple of weeks ago, I actually walked to run in, and one of the biggest reasons was the day before I skipped a meal. So I did actually come back home, fuel really well, and finish that workout later in the day. The other thing is sleep status, just checking in on how well rested we are from a sleep point of view. And the other thing that's quite important is how many runs a week a runner does. So if a runner does 3 runs a week, and in a 4-week training block, they skip 2 runs, it's quite a large percentage of the training in that 4 weeks. Whereas if somebody runs 6 times a week, skipping 2 runs is obviously only half of that. So here are a few things to maybe think about in terms of when you're actually about to do the run, and you've kind of still thinking about whether you should do it or not. So here are some options. Number 1, do the run. Just get out and do it and see what happens. It's actually very difficult for non-elite athletes to overtrain. We might end up doing something that's called non-functional overreaching, where we stress our body a bit too much and not give it the right tools to recover. But in the longer term, it's going to be easy to recover from this. So it's really unlikely with one run that it's going to sort of destroy a training block. So maybe just go do the run. The other thing is to do a test run. This is something that I like to do. So I go out with the intention of doing the run, but I've also got a little kind of idea that if I'm really not feeling it after a few miles, I can just walk it back in. Might even tie a wind block around my waist or something like that, so I can just pop that on and walk it back in. The other consideration is to overfuel the run a little bit. So maybe it's just a short, easy run, a run that you wouldn't normally fuel. And it might be worth just taking a little bit of something 15 minutes before you go out. And then maybe even taking a gel halfway around the run. And maybe the same goes for hydration as well. Maybe just take a bottle out with you when you wouldn't normally. Other things to think about if you decide not to do the run there and then. The other thing is to do the run on another day. So see if it fits in on another day on your calendar. Or maybe do the run later in the day, as I did a few weeks ago when I really wasn't feeling it. Went out for a run, didn't work. I was poorly fueled, got some fuel down me and did the run later in the day, and I actually felt amazing. You can also add the volume to some of your other runs. So if you skip a 4 miler and you've got another 2 or 3 runs left in the week, you could maybe get even 2 or 3 of those miles and just pad them into the other runs to keep that aerobic capacity high and drive that aerobic capacity that we're trying to do. The other thing obviously is to just skip the run. Just don't do it. And it might even be the point where you change your training block and you actually decide, what's coming up is really important. I've looked back and I feel like I'm carrying too much fatigue. It might be time for a deload week. Deload weeks are not set in stone. We can move them around. If we're feeling amazing on a build week 3, we might do another week. And if we're feeling really fatigued at the end of a build week 2, we might add a deload week early. So it is a risk assessment, working out whether to run or not, but we can't always base it on listening to the body and how we feel. We've got to ask ourselves specific questions because, as Courtney DeWalter said, no one can run these miles for you. So I hope that's useful. And if you've got any questions or comments, just please add them below. And for now, happy running.